All right, this is Chef Junior. I'm going to train you and show you how to trim a brisket. I want my students at home to try this, throw a brisket on the grill, but you need to learn how to trim it in order to get the better flavor into your meat. Some people leave the fat on there, okay, and just throw seasoning on it and throw it and cook it. Barbacoa is made that way. But if you're going to do Texas barbecue and you're trying to do a barbecue competition and you want the flavor and the judges to rate your brisket #1, then you're going to want to do it Texas style. And Texas style means you're trimming all this, most of this fat that's on this brisket. As you can see, this is a muscle. It has two different muscles inside this brisket. So there's one flat muscle that goes all the way across, another muscle goes on top. Okay, and when I trim it, you're going to be able to see the two separate muscles here after I'm done. All right, so what I'm doing is the bulky part of this fat right here, I'm trying to trim it down. Okay, now I'm not using gloves, but because you don't have to use gloves with raw meat, because raw meat cooks on the grill or cooks on the pan, and you kill the bacteria that way. So you do not have to use gloves on it. And preferably, I would not use gloves because you have more of a chance of the gloves slipping and you cutting yourself with a knife. So that is why I recommend you not using gloves on this. But, so what I'm doing is you see, I'm grabbing the fat, pulling it apart, and trimming it through. And you'll be able to, this one is a real fat brisket. Now, with just that one trim right there, you can see this muscle goes this direction, and you can see the grain of the meat. That's the direction it goes. See it? That's muscle grain. See this one right here, on this side, the muscle grain goes this direction. So it's totally two different muscles. That's where you got the two different grains. Now, this right here, we trim off this big old fat because this fat actually connects to the muscle that goes this direction. And it's got a whole fat layer that goes in between this muscle and that muscle. So all I'm doing is trimming a little bit on the outside, and there's nothing you can do about trimming that on the inside. You can keep on trimming and trimming and trimming and trimming that and going all the way through to that muscle and trim all that fat. But you're gonna have to watch how you cook it because you can dry out the meat really fast. So I just leave that on the inside and I trim this outside fat. And you want to make sure your knife is really sharp. If you have a dull knife, you're going to end up slipping and cutting yourself. So always have a sharp knife. This knife I just sharpened right beforehand, and it cuts right through the fat like butter. Because fat basically is butter, grease. So I got most of that. You see that fat? I'm just going to leave that little bit of trim of fat still on there. So it'll still get some moisture inside the meat. All right, now where you saw this fat right here, where I just cut out, well, it goes all the way through to this side too. It's one whole layer of fat. So I'm going to trim some of this fat out, and all I'm doing is going to the top and coming down at an angle on the inside. Then I'm going to get this side, use the sharpest part of your blade to start off, pull it down, and go straight across. You see that fat? It's all there. And as you can see, look, the fat will continue to go. I can keep on going and I can trim all this fat away all the way through to a hollow point on the other side. So we're not going to trim all that off. We're just going to leave some of that on there. All right. Now there's a big layer of fat. I'm going to come to the front. I want to take some of that off. See that? All fat. You'd be surprised how much little meat you get on a brisket. That's 25 pounds. Most of it's fat. And if you can, sometimes you can get underneath here, get to the muscle, separate the fat from the muscle, and then scrape it down right across. And you scrape it, you get that fat right off. See that? come to the top part on this side, and I'm still gonna scrape because this is a big layer of fat. This one's a real fat brisket. So this was a perfect one for me to show you on how to trim it. Still trimming fat down. What some competition people say is that when you have too much fat, then the smoke flavor can't get into the meat. And so that's what you're gonna end up missing, because it's gonna stay in the fat, and the fat keeps it from getting into the muscle. You can buy trim brisket at the grocery store, and it'll be trimmed just like the way I'm trimming it right now, where they're trimming the fat off. Already trimmed brisket. But when you go into a barbecue competition, they're not going to give you a trim brisket. They're going to give you a brisket just like this, and you have to learn how to trim it yourself. And there's a big old layer of fat. Alright, so I took off the majority of the fat. I'm still leaving some fat in there because you still want some moisture on it. And so that's a trim brisket right there. You see the layer, before you saw it was all white. Took a lot of the white off, and it's trimmed much thinner. So now the smoke's going to be able to penetrate to the meat part of the brisket. And that's what you wanted to do, is get in the flavor of the smoke flavor into the meat. So we're trimmed pretty good. I just like touching it up a little bit more. Okay, so now seasoning on it. Seasoning depends on you. The main seasonings I put on mine is salt, garlic, onion powder, chili powder, and comino. Okay, that's what I love to use on there. I add other spices, but those are my secret ingredients that we win competitions with, and I'm not going to tell you that because you got to learn those spices on your own. Season to taste. I wouldn't put more salt than I would any other seasonings. So if you do 1 cup of salt, then you need 1 cup of chili powder, 1 cup of onion powder, 1 cup of not comino because it's real strong. So you might want to do 1/4 of a cup. So learn your seasonings. Be generous with it, okay? Because once it gets onto the meat and it smokes, all that seasoning is going to adhere to the meat, and every time you slice it, you're going to get a taste of that flavor of that meat. All right, thank you guys.